The sting on my left cheek was so violent it knocked my breath away, sending a spray of crimson across the pure ivory lace of my wedding dress. 120 guests gasped in collective horror. My mother stood over me, her palms still quivering with rage, screaming, "And oh, daughter of mine, where's that?" Everyone thought she was talking about my dress. They thought it was just a narcissistic mother having an explosive breakdown over controlling my big day. But as the sting in my jaw turned into a dull roar, my groom, a sharp, calm Marine pilot, stepped between us. He didn't yell. He simply signaled the two uniformed officers stationed at the back of the venue. What my mother didn't know was that the heirloom dress I was wearing contained a secret sewn into the lining. And days later, under oath in a courtroom, her anger completely shattered into sheer panic. My name is Clara, I'm 32 years old, and until my wedding day, I thought my mother's suffocating control was just her way of loving me. Growing up, Evelyn didn't just parent. She dictated. My clothes, my career, my friends, everything passed through her iron filter. But nothing prepared me for the split second my hand met the altar and her palm struck my face with maximum force. The sound cracked through the quiet sanctuary like a gunshot. The force sent my head snapping sideways, the sharp edge of my grandmother's vintage brooch scraping across my lip, leaving a trickle of blood to stain the intricate white lace near my neckline. Guests bolted from their pews. My maid of honor let out a piercing scream. But Evelyn didn't look remorseful. Her face was a mask of sheer, unhinged fury as she pointed a shaking finger at me and spat those words, "And oh, daughter of mine, where's that?" To the 120 horrified people watching, it looked like a classic narcissistic meltdown, a mother losing her mind because I defied her vision for my wedding day. They thought she was disgusted by the style, or furious that I hadn't chosen the modern designer gown she'd tried to force on me. They were completely wrong. That slap wasn't about vanity or wedding etiquette. It was pure, unadulterated desperation. My mother wasn't trying to save my appearance. She was trying to destroy the gown before its secret could destroy her. My lip throbbed with a sickening heat, the taste of copper sharp against my tongue. Before Evelyn could raise her hand a second time, a solid wall of dress blues moved between us. Mark, my husband-to-be and an active-duty Marine pilot, stepped forward with terrifying calm. His posture was rigid, his eyes turned to ice. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed a firm, protective hand on my shoulder and used his body to shield me completely from my mother's wild eyes. "You just assaulted a civilian on church property," Mark said, his voice cutting through the hysterical murmur of the crowd like a razor. "And you just ruined a military ceremony." Evelyn scoffed, trying to brush past him with her usual entitlement. "Step aside, Mark. This is a private family matter between a mother and her ungrateful daughter." "It ceased being a private matter the moment you drew blood," Mark replied smoothly. He raised his left hand and signaled toward the back of the venue. Two off-duty officers, close friends from Mark's unit who were attending as guests, immediately moved down the aisle. The room went dead silent as the metallic click of handcuffs echoed off the stained glass windows. Evelyn gasped in disbelief as her wrists were snapped together behind her back. "You can't do this to me. I'm the mother of the bride," she shrieked, kicking and twisting as she was led down the aisle in front of everyone we knew. Mark didn't watch her leave. He turned to me, gently wiping the blood from my lip with his thumb, his gaze locking onto the torn lace lining near my waist. The sanctuary emptied in a blur of hushed chatter and sympathetic looks. An hour later, Mark and I were back in the quiet sanctuary of our apartment, the weight of the day crashing over us. The formal reception was canceled, the cake left untouched. I sat on the edge of our bed, still wearing the ruined dress, staring blankly at my reflection. Mark knelt beside me with a warm cloth, carefully dabbing at my swollen lip. "Clara," he said softly, "look down at your waist." I looked down at the area where Evelyn's sharp nails had caught the fabric during her outburst. The outer silk had been frayed, exposing a thick, stiff inner layer of the vintage lining that felt entirely different from the rest of the gown. This wasn't standard dressmaker's stiffener. With precise, gentle movements, Mark used his pocket knife to snip the remaining stitches along the inner seam. My breath caught as he pulled out a flat, heavy piece of oilcloth, carefully folded and sealed with yellowed tailoring tape. My hands shook as I peeled back the decades-old tape. Inside was a crisp bank document dated nearly 12 years ago, alongside a handwritten letter in my late grandmother's distinctive, elegant cursive script. "My dearest Clara," the letter began. "If you are reading this on your wedding day, it means you have chosen your own path, and it means your mother has failed to hide the truth from you. I hid this ledger where only a bride wearing my dress would ever find it, because I knew Evelyn's greed would know no bounds once I was gone." I stared at the enclosed financial statement, the numbers burning into my retinas. It was an original bank ledger detailing a trust fund established by my grandmother, one valued at over $600,000. A trust fund I was meant to inherit on my 30th birthday, but had never received. The air in the room grew heavy as the full horror of my mother's betrayal settled over us. According to the ledger, my grandmother had placed the money in a locked, high-yield trust when I was just 18. The conditions were crystal clear. The capital was strictly mine, intended to be accessed on my 30th birthday or my wedding day, whichever came first. So why had I lived through my 20s believing I was completely broke? Whenever I'd struggled through college, working 2 jobs while eating canned soup, Evelyn had constantly reminded me how generous she was for helping me pay rent. When I turned 32 years ago, she casually mentioned that my grandmother's estate had been depleted by medical expenses before her death. It had all been a cold, calculated lie. Mark immediately pulled up his laptop, connecting the account numbers from the hidden document to an official asset tracking portal. Within minutes, the paper trail unfolded like a crime novel. Evelyn had forged my signature on power of attorney documents just months after my grandmother passed away. Year after year, she'd systematically siphoned off tens of thousands of dollars, using my inheritance to fund her lavish lifestyle, her country club memberships, her luxury European vacations, and the remodeling of her pristine suburban home. She had spent almost every single dime. The piece of paper in my hands wasn't just a wedding gift for my grandmother, it was the ultimate trap. Evelyn knew that the moment I stepped into that heirloom gown, the truth would be exposed. She hadn't hit me because she hated my dress. She hit me out of pure, frantic terror, desperate to tear the fabric away before I ever felt the secret hiding beneath the lace. By the next morning, my phone was blowing up with a barrage of notifications that refused to stop. Evelyn was released on bail within 24 hours, and her panic was palpable through every text message she sent. At first, she tried her usual guilt trips and emotional manipulation. "Clara, how could you let your husband put your own mother in handcuffs? It was just an emotional argument. Drop these ridiculous assault charges immediately so we can move past this embarrassing mistake." When I ignored her calls, she mobilized the extended family. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who knew nothing about the hidden trust fund began calling me, lecturing me about family honor and forgiveness. They claimed my mother was heartbroken and only wanted what was best for me. Then, Mark's lawyer sent Evelyn's attorney a formal notice that we had discovered the hidden trust ledger and intended to submit it as evidence of criminal fraud alongside the assault charges. The tone of her messages changed overnight from fake remorse to sheer venom. "You ungrateful brat," she texted at 3 a.m. "I raised you. I deserve that money for everything I gave up for you. If you take me to court over this, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of cold-hearted monster you really are. You won't get a dime back." She didn't realize that every single threat, every venomous text message, was being logged directly into our legal file. Evelyn thought she could bully me into silence one last time. She had no idea she was handing us the rope for her own execution in court. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom buzzed quietly as my mother sat at the defense table, looking shockingly small. Gone was her tailored designer suit. In its place was a plain navy dress. Her usual posture collapsed into a defeated hunch. Her attorney tried gallantly to spin a narrative of a mother's sudden emotional breakdown. "Your Honor," he argued, "this was a tragic family dispute. A mother, overwhelmed by the stress of her daughter's high-pressure wedding day, simply lost her composure in a single heat of the moment lapse. My lawyer stood up calmly. "Your Honor, this wasn't a sudden lapse in judgment. It was a violent attempt to conceal grand larceny, fraud, and systematic financial abuse." He submitted the physical evidence: the torn wedding gown lining, the oilcloth packet, the original bank statement, and a certified forensic audit. The courtroom was dead silent as our team laid out the trail of forged signatures showing over $600,000 stolen from my trust fund over 12 years. Then came the knockout punch. My lawyer played the audio files of the frantic voice messages and read the venomous text messages Evelyn had sent me the night before her arrest, where she openly admitted to taking the money because she felt entitled to it. Evelyn's lawyer turned pale and leaned over to whisper to her, but it was too late. The judge looked down over his glasses with cold disgust. "Mrs. Vance, I suggest you think very carefully before taking the stand." When my mother was called to testify, her defense completely shattered under cross-examination. Cornered by her own written threats and undeniable bank records, her arrogant facade split wide open. She broke down sobbing on the stand, not out of remorse, but out of sheer, helpless panic. I had to stop her. Evelyn blubbered, her voice echoing off the hardwood walls. If she wore that dress, she would find the ledger. "I spent the money. I didn't have any left to give her." Evelyn's tearful confession in front of the judge sealed her fate. She was convicted of felony grand larceny, forgery, and misdemeanor assault. Because she had liquidated almost all her assets to fund her lifestyle, the court ordered a full forfeiture of her suburban house and remaining savings as partial restitution for the stolen $600,000. To avoid maximum prison time, she agreed to a plea deal involving 5 years of formal probation, mandatory financial counseling, and a permanent, legally binding restraining order that forbids her from ever contacting me again. The woman who spent my entire life controlling my every breath is now legally erased from it. Mark and I took what remained of the recovered funds and used it to buy a quiet, sunlit home near his airbase. 2 months after the trial, we held a small, private ceremony on a cliffside overlooking the ocean. There were no grand halls, no sprawling guest lists, and no toxic family drama, just the two of us, a few true friends, and an ocean breeze. I didn't wear my grandmother's dress that day, but I kept the piece of lace where the truth was hidden. It sits framed on my desk, a reminder that no matter how deep a lie is buried, truth always finds a way to tear through. I finally have the life, the peace, and the freedom my mother tried so hard to steal from me.